Now, this morning, we heard from Alex McCracken from JP Morgan about the investing trends in AI and frontier technologies. Please take your seats. There's plenty of seats around these sides. This afternoon, we're very fortunate to have a presentation from Ali Gillen-Livesey, who is the head of AI strategy at JP Morgan. Think about what that job entails. She's an extremely busy person, and we are very grateful for her to come and give us a talk. Her role involves developing strategic partnerships and investing in companies, literally for one of the world's biggest financial players. So we're very lucky to have her come and speak. Little known fact about her, she's a trained ski instructor. So here to guide us through the slopes of AI and investing, please welcome Ali Gillen-Livesey.
Good afternoon, everyone. So thank you for the intro. So I lead our AI strategy and product management for the commercial and investment bank at JP Morgan. So responsible for AI use cases, so thinking about how do we actually prioritize all the use cases that we've got, and we've now got thousands, which is brilliant. And then talking to our clients in terms of what are the key applications and areas where they could be using AI in their day-to-day. And lastly, in terms of product management, we're responsible for rolling out our internal AI tools to the 80,000 people in the commercial and investment bank. So today we're focused on delivering business value for AI in the enterprise and share some thoughts about what we're doing. And obviously we've been in the space for a while, so some of the learnings that can help in your journeys as we're relatively mature. And this is obviously a very key topic, C-suite down. But before I dive in, AI is not new to JP Morgan. You may know that we hired Manuela Veloso back in 2018. She used to be head of machine learning at Carnegie Mellon and a leading professor in the world in AI. And with that, she brought her whole kind of research team, and we now have sort of 200 PhD research data scientists. We also announced last year at a C-suite level a chief data and analytics officer, Teresa Heitsenrather. She previously led our security services business. So I'm sure you've seen in the news as well, Jamie talking a lot about what's happening in AI. And so top down, we really have a lot of focus in making sure we're driving value. So we have about 2,000 people globally thinking about sort of data science, whether that's machine learning, AI research, or data management itself. And this has obviously set us in a pretty good stead. So you may have seen a company called Evident AI recently launched an independent benchmark of all the leading banks globally across EMEA, North America, and APAC. And JP Morgan has been ranked number one in the last couple of rankings, so earlier this year. And that was across areas like talent, innovation, leadership, and transparency. And I was at the symposium that they held last week, and it's very interesting to hear, within the banking community, everyone's very focused on ROI and kind of getting value out of AI. So 2023 was the year of hype. It was very exciting. Everyone wanted to get access. But it's now thinking about, well, what kind of use cases are you actually focused on? And are you actually getting value out of using the tool? And how do we even measure that? And how do we think about it? So a quick recap of what we mean. So generative AI, I think everyone now knows what generative AI means. But really, this is the transformer architecture that really changed all this. And we see the kind of companies that we're obviously seeing in the space, and we're taking a very LLM agnostic strategy, so working with the key players. And as you see in the benchmarks, it's all very exciting. Everyone's competing together. But obviously, GPT-4o recently announced a very powerful model, sort of when using it compared to previous models, it really, the kind of value add in terms of the nuance, you can really tell in that model. And then you've got obviously Anthropic's Claude 3.5, Gemini's 1.5, and then of course open source models, which really do have their value. Mistral from Mistral, Llama from Meta, those types of models that we also consider, as well as the kind of medium-sized enterprise-type models like the Mistrals and the Coheres that really focused on developing solutions for the enterprise. And internally, we're very much taking a view on well, all of these models could be valuable, so we benchmark them and we look at them and think about, for different use cases, what would be the best model for that specific use case. And you may want a smaller model and then fine-tuning it. And then even more interestingly is obviously post-transformer architecture, but I won't go into that today, around state space models and liquid neural networks. It's a very exciting area to research. Obviously lots of companies gaining traction in this new kind of environment across the stack. So if we think about the tech stack, kind of bottom up, you've obviously got the compute layer, and then you've kind of got the model layer, the data layer, the kind of observability layer, and then obviously the application layer. And we're working obviously with various companies as they develop and emerge. And the application layer, I think, is an interesting space for us. There's a lot of companies like Harvey you may have heard of in the legal domain. You've got companies like Jasper in marketing, but actually trying to see, as we develop in this journey, I mean, globally, what are the kind of key companies that will be in each domain, and especially in the finance sector, how do we think about, which companies to partner with at that application layer? So kind of why now? As I mentioned, this really started in 2017. Our research team have been in this space using smaller size, sort of I wouldn't call them large language models, but smaller models, really since sort of 2017-18, when Google Brain released the paper, Attention is All You Need. It's very heavy reading. I've read it about 5 times and still don't fully understand it, but it's worth having a read. It's sort of 10 pages long. And that really explains kind of why we have the innovation and the development that we see today. A lot of those researchers have gone to set up their own companies. So if you're interested in the space, it's always good to follow where they've gone as we think about the likes of Adept, Cohere, Character AI, etc. But obviously in terms of scaling, in terms of model size, so this development allowed us to have bigger models, but also training data. And one of the things we obviously have at JP Morgan is a lot of data. So we're thinking about how do we use that data and how do we get value out of that, and making sure that sort of we are using our proprietary data in the right way. Other areas why now, the instruction tuning, that was that ability to interact with the model, having that human in the loop we've seen has been really, really powerful in the last few years. And then, of course, the announcement of ChatGPT. So I think 2 years ago, if you asked a trader what our AI teams did, I don't think they'd know unless they were very specific in the quant research space. Whereas now, we have bankers and traders coming to us saying, I really want access to our internal AI environment and access to sort of a large language model type chat tool that we're thinking about. So in terms of, just to share a story, this is not at all JP Morgan related, but I bumped into a colleague earlier this week on the tube and said, he said, how things? And I'm like, oh yeah, great, AI is really busy. And he said to me, what are you doing? I was saying, thinking about, all these ChatGPT type tools. And he goes, well, what's ChatGPT? And I was quite surprised because I was like, I think it's on the front page of every single newspaper. But I think the key takeaway here is then I started talking to him about, well, what could you use in banking? So he's working on a deal at the moment. I said, well, put it in, ask some questions, and didn't quite give the right answer. So I said, started prompt engineering with him and saying, well, add this, add that. And then he got the output of what are the bidders on the deal that he was working on. And I think it's just very powerful to say that the big step now is adoption. So when we think about, in Silicon Valley, everyone's very excited about AI, but in reality, how do we make sure that everyone is understanding what AI can and cannot do for them, and also really trying to adopt and use these tools. So that is what we're spending a lot of time on, obviously thinking about upskilling across various teams and thinking about what is the use case that would be most relevant to you? If you're a salesperson, if you're in payments, if you're a trader, if you're in operations, how do you really get value out of these tools rather than that kind of hype cycle that we've seen, which is everyone wants access to sort of AI? So that leads me on to kind of the practical implications and the use cases that we're starting to see. As you can imagine, generative AI, obviously, across the different modalities. We've got audio, text, image, code, and then sort of multimodal. In the enterprise sort of setting, and I'd say even talking to clients, this probably resonates as well, it's really focused on the text and the code in terms of what those modalities can really develop to drive value. So in the code space, a lot of our developers using things like the various tools on the market, so just to name lots of them, but sort of GitHub Copilot or Codium, and how do you actually embed those tools within your kind of IDE and drive value? and developers are really excited about what they can do on that side of things. And then obviously in the tech side, that's huge, whether it's summarization, which is often overlooked actually in terms of the value and the efficiency that that brings. If we think about our researchers and research reports and how do you bring together all of that data and summarize it. But then, of course, knowledge retrieval being the key one. So that's that ability to find that information across multiple data sources, whether your data's in your CRM, whether your data's sitting in different areas of the business, and how do you bring all of that together to kind of get good results. So knowledge retrieval seems to be a very strong use case, and obviously that applies to lots of different things. And then, of course, multimodal, we're not there quite yet, but as we start to think about agents, and people have different views on what agents actually are, but and it's often overused, this terminology, but that's extremely powerful if you think about end-to-end automated workflows as we look at the next stage in terms of AI and what that brings. So just to say kind of the takeaways on what we think the value is around, what we're really thinking about around generative AI. Obviously, having a strong, mature governance framework, and that's something that we've developed over the years. And in terms of the regulatory space within that, the most comprehensive regulation out there is the EU AI Act, first proposed in 2021. Passed by the European Commission in 2022, and then by Parliament in 2023. And then, obviously, this year implemented in 2024 with a kind of grace period of 24 to 36 months. So that's probably the most comprehensive. And just to note on that, we've recently seen the kind of financial services having a focus on that as well. So that will be at the consultation from 18th of June this year until 13th of September. So there's a real focus on regulation, obviously, within the financial services. And then you obviously have other countries like the US and the UK also thinking about these things. Responsible AI, always a key topic, and obviously making sure that these models are not biased, and that's across the board. And then, of course, things like limitations around hallucinations. So these models are very valuable, but it's like, how do we use them and make sure that there's always a human in the loop? So the lack of kind of interpretability on some of these outputs is something that, as an industry or even sort of as a research community, is still an area for growth. And then, of course, lastly, we're thinking about where do we want to really spend time in terms of the use cases versus where will AI just be embedded in the tools that we already use today? So the likes of like an MS365 Copilot and other solutions that will just have AI embedded in all the tools that we use today. So that's a key area that we're thinking about, is where do we need to spend our data science time? Where can we use off-the-shelf tools versus where will AI just be embedded within our workflows as we know it? So reflecting back, I guess, on the last 18 months, it's been a roller coaster. And sort of, America, I'm here on time here today, but it's a really exciting space, and obviously being at JP Morgan as a leader in this space is fantastic, but it's also how do we make sure that we continue to drive that value by really understanding which use cases drive value for the business and prioritizing them as such. So that's something we're thinking about. How do we prioritize all these hundreds of use cases and ideas that we've developed across all of our lines of businesses. So with that, I will leave that as a kind of takeaway that we're not done yet, but it's only just the beginning, and now it's very much how do you make sure that you measure that ROI and the costs and the value. So thank you.